Okay, so let me know if this has ever happened to you. Have you ever gone to a bookshelf and picked up a book that you own and realized that the cover was different? Or opened it up and realized that some of the words had changed? Probably not, right? Because that's typically not something that happens in the real world. Things don't just magically change before our eyes. But if this was online and in the digital world, it's very possible that this could happen. And today we're going to be talking about exactly why that is, and what digital ownership is like in the 21st century. So just so you know, Slayers, this is actually a speech that I wrote for my public speaking class, and some of you probably already know all of this information, which is great. But for those of you who don't, it's really important to understand what you actually own in this new evolving world, and how you can incorporate that into your life. So if you don't know some of these things, and I didn't know some of these things, then this is for you. So I'm not saying that this is a super in-depth conversation about digital ownership, but this is more like a high-level overview, and if you want to continue the conversation a little bit more in depth, we can do so in the comments. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. So to start off, what is ownership? Well, ownership is the state act or right of possessing something. And in the physical world, this is really easily tracked. You could go to a store and buy a CD, for example, and now you own the CD. Or you could get tired of it and give it to a thrift store and someone else could buy it. Now they own the CD. And it's really easy to track who owns what throughout this entire cycle. But online, it's a little bit different. And that's because whenever you purchase something online, more likely than not, it's a license instead of the actual product. So you are still subject to the terms and conditions of the company that you bought it from and also the licensing company, even though you actually already bought the asset. So some really pertinent examples of this in the real world are like Netflix. If you've ever wondered why your favorite show wasn't on Netflix, even though you pay the same subscription rate every month, it's probably because of licensing. And the same goes for Amazon. If you've ever bought a Kindle ebook, you're actually just buying the license of the book rather than an actual book. So this is a little strange in my opinion, but we can go ahead and dive a little bit further into some other trends before we get really into all of this. So another trend that's emerging through digital ownership is NFTs, and these are non-fungible tokens. Now I'm not saying that I know a ton about these, but from my brief research, basically an NFT is representative ownership. So it's a unique set of code that you can buy online and it could represent something in the real world. So you could buy an NFT and it can represent a physical piece of art, which is really cool because people all around the world can now create their own representative ownership and not just big businesses. Another trend of digital ownership is of course the subscription model, and I found a couple of numbers that say that the average person spends $133 a month on subscriptions, which is crazy, especially coming from a college student that mooches off of her parents' subscriptions. That's a lot of money to be paying every year. I believe it totals to be around $1,600 per year, which is crazy, but it just goes to show that the subscription model is really, really popular right now because you can gain access to a lot of different things for a relatively small amount of money per month. And of course, businesses like this model because it means that they continuously get money every month. So who does this really affect? Well, it affects a lot of people. Like I said, it affects people who stream movies on places like Netflix or Disney+. It affects people who stream music, like through Spotify or Apple Music. It affects people who even buy games. Often when you buy a game, you're just buying the license through the company. And it of course affects small businesses because it's pretty hard to compete with this kind of digital ownership. But now you might be wondering, how can this affect an asset and how can this really directly affect me? Well, an asset can be deleted. So in 2009, a very famous case is when Amazon took away the copies of 1984 from users' Kindles. And basically, people bought these books and they were on their Kindles, and one day, poof, they were just gone. Which I think is pretty crazy because if you went out and bought a physical book, it's not like the bookseller's gonna knock on your door and be like, hey, can I have that back? You own that book. But if you own a book through Kindle, they technically can take it away whenever. And a similar thing happened with a company called Ubisoft, well, at least I think I'm pronouncing that name right, where the game The Crew was deleted from users' consoles, even though they of course paid money for that. So another thing that can happen is that assets can be changed, and Disney Plus happens to do this a lot, where in comparison to what aired on cable versus on the box set or on Disney Plus can be a little different sometimes. And you can see this in small ways, like in episode titles. For example, Good Luck Charlie, one of the episodes was called Goodbye Charlie, and then they changed it on Disney Plus to be called Good Luck Teddy, and that's really due to because there's another movie called Goodbye Charlie, and it's kind of speculated that they don't really want those two things associated, but Disney Plus just has the right to do that since it's their content. Or it can be pretty big changes, like in Lilo and Stitch, when Lilo is hiding in a dryer in the original version. On Disney Plus, they don't don't show that at all. It's more like she's hiding in a cabinet, and they changed an entire scene in a movie, which is kind of crazy in my opinion. But of course you can say that they did it for a good reason, and I agree, because you don't really want to be sending that message to kids. So I'm not saying that it's always bad that things can be changed, but it is important to know that your asset could be changed at any time, and you might want to be paying attention to some of these things. And then the last thing I'll talk about is that an asset can be inaccessible to you. So if you ever needed to go on a plane and download some movies through Netflix, you might notice that sometimes you can download an episode and sometimes you can't. So for example, Gilmore Girls, you can't download the episodes ever, which I think is very sad, but it's because of a licensing issue there, and therefore it's inaccessible to you if you don't use Wi-Fi. And the same thing also goes for Amazon Kindles, where basically you can only download books and read them through Kindle devices or the Kindle app, which means you can never ever switch e-readers and carry over your books with you because you can't download them and transfer them in any way. So it becomes inaccessible to you if you decide to switch ecosystems. So to conclude, I know that this is a pretty short video and it doesn't have a lot of information about it, but I just more wanted to get you thinking about digital ownership and this world that we're constantly living in, and what you really own as a person. Do you own any physical media? Do you own a lot of things through a certain company? Do you want to diversify that at all? Or do you want to just stick with it and understand that sometimes there are going to be limitations in this world? Personally, I didn't know some of these things, and I don't really know why they don't tell us this more often. I mean, I know it's kind of common knowledge that things that you buy are more like being licensed, but I didn't really think about it ever too hard until I realized that, hey, maybe I don't actually own all that I think that I own. And I'm not saying that you should be insane about this or anything and go like hoard all of the physical media that you can. I just think it's something to start a conversation with and to get a little bit aware on, and for you guys to track as our evolution changes how we are owning things and what that looks like in the 21st century. So thank you guys for listening to me yap. I know, like I said, that this was a public speaking assignment, and it was, and I feel like it went pretty well when I did the assignment, so let me know what you think of my public speech. But of course on YouTube I could be a little bit more myself, so I hope you enjoyed that. So yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Bye!